So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to an uncharacteristically rainy day in the south of Middle-earth. And I thought a while ago I had done the earliest thing in my backlog, but if Tommy hadn't actually reminded me of this one, it would have been one of those to sadly fall through the cracks. And that would be a shame because this one's got a fairly unique setup really, in the sense that this is a full Haradran civil war between the tribal attackers and the more civilized, perhaps, defenders. And that's an interesting discrepancy between the two. Obviously, we're well used to having factions have access to everything in their arsenal, and this time both of them are going to be deprived of some pretty key aspects of what their factions are all about. You would suggest that the more well-rounded forces, understandably perhaps, are going to be the civilized armies of the defence, or more civilized armies of the defence, and then the attackers are going to have access to all of the really high damage stuff that Harad are really well known for, but also all of the weaknesses that come along with that. There's really not many of these units that you would imagine are going to be particularly resilient, especially when it comes to attacking into some of the positions that they may very well have to. This is also a map that we've seen several times before at this point as well. It's become a fairly popular one to play on. I mean, you can see why, because there are several aspects to it. You've got the initial settlement with some of the water hazards as well, which form some more regular choke points. Then you've got the more heavily fortified areas within, and the final stand is also a pretty good one, both in terms of your ability to hold even narrower choke points, but also getting some good elevation, though it is more exposed than the middle layer perhaps. So anyway, we will talk about the attacking armies as we often do first, starting off with Nuke, who, I mean, it says Numenor of course, but they are all Haradrim armies today. And I would imagine that we're not really going to see a huge amount of variation between each of these forces, because there's only so many units that each of these armies is going to be able to pick from. So we'll start with this one. The Champions of Nafarat, I think, are going to be the General's Bodyguard unit for all of these attacking forces. Interestingly enough, Ar-Pharazôn, as it is Numenor that are effectively wearing Harad's skin here. Ar-Pharazôn, the General unit, is still here. Trollmen of Harad, I mean, this really is the core of what the defending Harad forces are going to be missing, because when you think of Harad and what to be scared of, certainly from an infantry perspective, these are the units that you're going to be thinking of. Very, very dangerous. Several hit points. Champions of Nafarat with 3, of course, and huge armor-piercing attacks as well. Something else Harad is well known for are their javelins, and again, this is where the tribal units are going to hold the distinct edge with Muhad beast hunters. Again, very lightly armoured. That's going to be the case really across all of the attacking forces. The armour is going to be very much in question, the survivability in general, but the damage is not, and the Muhad beast hunters will be able to do that, albeit even the defending Harad forces today are maybe not quite so armour reliant as their more traditional enemies in the north and the west. Hashari Stalkers, so the rangers here are going to be on the side of the attackers. Big damage of course, and again, even though they are more resilient, the defending Harad forces are still going to be somewhat vulnerable to projectiles. Depending on how well they use the settlement itself is going to depend on how vulnerable exactly. But the Hashari Stalkers are going to have little problems in terms of dealing with the vast majority really of the defending units on a one-to-one basis. 2 Demons of the Desert is big. I mean, they are, in terms of sheer killing power with their javelins, the strongest javelins in the game. As long as you don't, I mean, technically the Witchers count as a throwing projectile unit in the game files, but they're something completely different. And the Demons of the Desert, though, very much just your regular javelin, albeit far more devastating than most, albeit, again, light armour, limited survivability there. Muhad Beast Masters, the Camel Riders here. Again, javelins on camelback. It'll be interesting to see what sort of mounted units the other forces are also bringing to the table. Several units of Hashari, so more throwing projectiles here with the throwing daggers. It's interesting the Hashari are in the tribal force actually. With the cloaks and the garbs they look more like city dwellers, but anyway, again, more throwing projectiles though. And then Muhad Berserkers here en masse as well. Strong enough in terms of their ability to deal damage. Again, the armour piercing may not quite be the be-all and end-all that it is against other forces, however, which is the saving grace for the defenders, because certainly in terms of the aggressive power you would give the edge to the attackers all day long. Tommy himself, who sent me this battle replay and I believe set it up, so I mean it's been quite a while in the making. I'm pretty sure this was way back in spring that this battle was run, so it goes to show how badly my schedule got messed up, I suppose. Hashari Stalkers, again, 2 units of them, several units of the Hashari once more. Is this going to be exactly the same army? Well, 2 units of Muhad Beastmasters this time. We've also got more of the Beast Hunters and Berserkers being the front line. I mean, next to no shields in this army, it's worth saying, so as much as the Hashari are taking up with the tribal forces this time around, the regular archers for Harad should still be more than capable of punching holes through these infantry units, and even the trollmen here, they are shielded, but the armour is, again, basically non-existent, so as soon as their hit points are gone, that could prove to be a problem. Demons of the Desert, only 1 unit this time, and Champions of Nafarats once more. Moving on, I mean, the obvious thing to note here is the Mumakil that are in the attacking armies as well, which certainly makes sense. Winged Swordsman 44 playing here. Got the Beast Masters, again, the Hashari. I think the Mumakil are going to be the point of difference here. Berserkers and Beast Hunters again. And then some Champions of Nafarat and some Demons of the Desert once more. So yeah, use of the Mumakil is going to be interesting also, especially considering that I don't know, we'll have to see what the defenders do have in store, but the Javelins for Harad would probably be the best way to counteract them. And finally we have Hertumihai, who has got some Beast Hunters once more. We've got the Berserkers, who are skulking around. This map has got quite a lot of terrain you can hide on its extremities, but that's not really terribly relevant because they are going to have to move forward on their own volition. Muhad Beastmasters again, Trollmen, Champions of Nafarat, again unsurprising, pretty much the same setup as Winged Swordsman before him when you consider the Mumakil. So, for the defending forces, how are they going to set themselves up? We start off with Hidden, who has got the Haradrim Spearmen. So again, the more functional entry-level units of spears are going to be here for the defenders today. Again, numerous anti-cavalry capabilities as well. They'll really struggle against the high damage units though, just because of their own lower quality. Serpent Camel Archer is going to be an important unit, I think, in this particular matchup, because you can outrun pretty much everything the attackers have. The Mumakil have a ranged attack. The main threat to them, really, is the Hashari. Other than that, they've got pretty much free reign, and that could be of great benefit here to the defenders to sally out and try and utilise that, especially when you have it in conjunction with some more traditional shock cavalry. The Black Serpent bodyguards here, very fast, very deadly, and that's the way that you can equalise that infantry quality in terms of the damage you can take and receive here, because I mean the Trollmen will certainly outperform your infantry units in melee, but you can do a lot of damage more quickly with cavalry like that as long as you can get a good charge. And then the rest of his army is over here. The Southrons for the defenders once again, as we mentioned, because of the pitiful armour values that the tribal Harad forces have, the Southron archers are going to be pretty key in this matchup. Southron Warband will be there just to try and defend as well as they can. Pikes as well. I mean, we have seen the Mumakil melt before pikes on an ill-judged charge a few times before, so that could be where the Southron pikemen really make a name for themselves. And then armour upgrades all round, of course, for the dismounted Serpent Guard, who will be the best line-holding unit by far that the defenders have access to here. They will not be able to go blow for blow with the Trollmen without help, but they're the ones that will get closest to it. So, moving on, we have White Dolphin, who has got the dismounted Serpent Guard as well. Any differences? They've got the standard Serpent Guard, so again, this is the kind of unit that could be very, very important as the battle wears on, just because the charge damage has got so much potential. Again, I still think that this could be the single most important unit though, depending on how well these Serpent Camel Archers get used. As long as they stay clear of those Javelin throwers on Camelback as well. They've got the range, they've got the damage, poison projectiles as well, so the Muhads better watch out for that. More Southron Warband, of course. Again, Southron Warband in conjunction with the Serpent Guard and Pikes are going to be the key to this front line. Black Serpent Bodyguard as well, so another unit of them, certainly more deadly than the regular version. Southron Warband, some standard Haradrim Archers as well, so again not quite as good as the Southrons, but just sheer volume of arrows here could be the key. And then more Serpent Guard, Southron Warband, and more Serpent Guard. So the third defending army, don't think there's going to be too many differences here, but Y2K86 has got the Serpent Camel Archers as well. We have got the Southron Warband, dismounted Serpent Guard. Just seeing if there's anything. I'm pretty sure we've seen the entire. Well, actually, the Ballista is a point of difference. I mean, again, defending artillery could be really, really vital here, especially if they set it up correctly. But I'm pretty sure we've seen the whole Harad roster at this point. in either on the attackers or the defending army, which makes sense. There's only so many units to go round. Harad have got one of the bigger rosters in the game actually as well, compared to a few others. Another unit of Black Serpents. We've got another unit of Haradrim Spearmen with more Southrons, and then some dismounted Serpent Guard as well. And then this army, the final one under Medex's command again. This part of the map has always been a bit weird because this is where there's a huge amount of hidden terrain. So all of Medex's army is pretty much hidden except for a couple of units of the Southron Pikemen who are unable to hide, and the Ballista Crew as well, which is where the general is going to be today. Another golden clad general as well, this being the Harad though, the Black Serpent King. And yes, another unit of the Ballista as well, so they can be a little bit more liberal with these shots considering they have two of them. But yeah, this is interesting to see how this is going to go, because we rarely see factions split in such an organised fashion like this. We've seen mirror matches before, but not quite in this form. So yeah, we'll see. There will be a little bit of a cut as the attackers move their way forwards and the defenders dig themselves in. So we'll rejoin when the battle is about to get underway. Well, a quick snap charge to set things off. Kind of. I suppose he was actually going after the units in behind, but the reveal of the Hashari actually meant that the charge didn't come in the end. So even though it would have been a very juicy target indeed for the shock cavalry to open things up, with the hidden nature of the Hashari did actually help them a bit there. Albeit they definitely don't want to be on the front line any longer than they have to be, because this of course is one of the attacking force's more dangerous threats. And just seeing how these forces play off against one another, as long as the defenders keep things structured and keep the attackers at arm's length, you would think that because of the fragility of some of the tribal attacking forces here, that they wouldn't really be well placed to deal with that sort of thing. But also there's probably a more heavily mounted contingent from the defenders, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult for them to use their units in the way they would like, as long as they're penned up in their defensive shape as they are. So it may be a case of trying to outlast the attackers for as long as possible, and then late game trying to use the cavalry to your advantage. I mean, you've got the Ballista on the high ground over there. Managing to get a few hits into the Beast Hunters, but nothing too substantial for the time being. Skipping across to the other side, we have got the Mumakil and some Muhad Berserkers moving forwards as well. Poison projectiles and standard projectiles from the Southrons coming forward. And again, it's in this kind of engagement where the survivability of the attacking forces is going to be called into question, I'm sure. The dismounted Serpent Guard will really be earning their pay against the standard MUHADS. It's really up against the heavy-hitting Trollmen class of units where the defenders will be most concerned, you would suggest. Plenty of numbers from the MUHADS as well, though. The throwing projectile power is also something the defenders will have to be on the lookout for, because they only have standard archers and archers with poison projectiles to really respond at range with. This is where things could get pretty grisly pretty quickly, although some friendly fire there as well, heading the Muhad Berserkers' way. But this is one way to do an awful lot of damage to the front ranks of the Haradrim very quickly. I guess this is the difference between near Harad and far Harad. Mumakil thinking about moving forward. I mean, already bloodied up because of all the arrows they've taken, but I don't think that will have caused too much stress to them. Really, the main difference maker is going to be whether or not they get caught by pikes. But yeah, pulling off the front lines now. I thought they were routing actually, which is not beyond the pale for units like the Muhad Berserkers, but they're going to wade in here. There are no pikes, but there are spears. So whether or not they can rout all of these units, given the fact that those javelins have already made a bit of an impact. Dismounted, or the mounted Serpent Camel Archers moving forwards as well to try and truly finish this infantry attack off in double quick time. Still the Southron Archers plugging away at the attacking forces. Meanwhile, over here we do have the Muhad Beast Hunters. Got the melee combat sound effects here, but I don't think there's anything left in melee. They are going to need to make up their mind what they're doing in terms of their payload, but Hertumihai does have his attentions somewhat split at this point, which is why I'm a little bit surprised that his allies aren't maybe moving forwards with a little bit more gusto as well. But I suppose the price for getting it wrong for the attackers is the fact that their army can melt away far more quickly than they would like. It's really one of the more fragile army setups it's possible to bring to a battle, really, when you consider the low armour and the fact that Harad don't really have the best melee defense either. But I think even worse than that would be to linger on the edge of the Southron archers and the Serpent archers and the like, linger on the edge of their range. I mean, again, Harad don't have the most damaging archers among the defending ranks today either, but you don't need the most damaging archers to be able to do the damage needed against a force like the MUHADS and the Trollman. Forward come the Black Serpent bodyguard, so again another charge coming in from White Dolphin's cavalry. Changing direction to try and uncover the Hashari once again. Are they going to be able to get a charge at this close range though? It's an interesting conundrum actually. The javelins and the throwing knives of the standard Hashari, albeit they did reveal themselves and they are going to get charged into. Decent amount of damage done there, but there's a lot of crossfire that's going to come about as a result of this now. They're going to have to go through the backs of the Muhad Berserkers that were setting up a bit of a front line as well. Double stacking those units, but peeling themselves off the front line, turning around to try and kill off as many of these riders as they possibly can. But again, Muhad Berserkers, as with any shock infantry unit, really are going to be pretty effective against cavalry in a pure melee fight. It's really just the fact that they're a little bit more vulnerable to that initial huge charge damage that Lancers can do. Coming back for another bite of the cherry though, and that's a decent charge. The Muhad Berserker numbers tumbling. Again, those are the kind of damage values that they would really have been wanting to see, especially when the front line is made up of basic spears only. The Berserkers will have no issues dealing with them. The narrow bridge also being probed, this by Tommy's army. So the initial Muhad Berserkers, no real danger there, but the javelins following them up, and also the support from the Mumakil arrows from across the water, going to be capable of dishing out damage. I mean, let's not get it twisted here. It's not as if the defenders are particularly resilient either. In many ways, the more high damage projectiles of all types are in the possession of the attackers today. It's just that they're going to have a significantly more difficult time utilising them to their fullest. It's a good point actually, we don't have any foot-based Serpent archers, do we? Which is an interesting omission. Thought that would have been one of the centerpieces of the defending force today. Southern archers going to have to pick up the slack, doing so admirably for the time being. Skipping over to the other side once again, starting to make some gains in terms of yardage is Hertumihai with his forces, but pikes are now being brought into the equation, so it's not as if you can thoughtlessly lumber forward with the Mumakil, and one of them is down anyway. A little bit of damage coming in from the Hashari Stalkers, again against a pretty much entirely Southron front line. Hashari Stalkers will be able to fill their boots in terms of kills, but again the question has to be asked about how much value you're really getting, although again in terms of bodyguard units it is the Black Serpents, and maybe foot-based archers are not the best unit to be utilising against them anyway, so just trying to get sheer volume of kills may be the way to go, and then as soon as the enemy is softened up appropriately, that's when you can come forward with all of your Trollmen class units and try and batter the enemy into submission that way. Front line is looking, well, very much on its last legs. They're going to have to start again from their beginnings over here, the attackers. The high road into the settlement does give them a bit of a vantage point if they do end up with a little bit more in terms of their ammunition supply. Another unit of Muhad Berserkers moving forward. Beastmasters still in some of the more open parts of the map, but so far the middle has been left alone. Instead it is the flanks that are getting pressurised. Getting forced back to the bridge now. Again, both sides have taken some pretty hefty damage on their initial ranks. The scraps of the units that started the conflict. Again, the Mumakil And the Beast Hunters. Taking the occasional hit. I mean, the one thing that you can say, at least for the Muhad Beast Hunters, is the fact that they do have those bucklers to give them a little bit of cover against incoming arrow fire in comparison to the Berserkers, but even then, it's not really going to be enough. In this situation, Serpent Camel Archers, the one-handed Shotels being used. Again, the mass will be more than enough to polish off a unit that is already this weak, even though Horse Archers have got the minimum charge possible for a cavalry unit, but it's the mass that does the vast majority of the heavy lifting. We turn around again. Deal with what remains. I mean, there's not a huge amount of routing going on, to give Harad their credit, on either side of the fence today. It is over here where the bloodiest fight has happened so far, and the most consistent one, which is interesting considering they're fighting uphill into a narrower choke point, but it is a slightly more isolated part of the settlement, so if you do start to make gains over here and reinforcements do get trundled across, it does leave the door open somewhat for the attackers in other parts of the field. Those Hashari Stalkers will certainly be getting an impressive kill count for themselves. Southron Pikemen will be the real prize there. Again, not the best pikes in the game by any stretch of the imagination, but they are a very key individual unit in this battle. Very effective anchor. Of course, there used to be a Muhad two-handed spear as well, but they were removed because it was a bit redundant really to have two pike units in the game, although this would be maybe the one situation where that redundancy would not be true. Black Serpent Bodyguard moving forward, Southron Warband counter-attacking a little bit actually. There's a lot of dead riders over here, mind you, and that will come about as a result of those Muhad Beast Masters, those javelins, coaxing the enemy cavalry in. The Muhad Beast Hunters also close by. And again, they do get the charge off, but they're going to want to cycle out of that conflict pretty quickly. The Beast Hunters are spears in melee after all. Forward come the Serpent Camel Archers, having already taken a bit of a beating, as evidenced by the corpses of both man and camel. Yeah, some good crossfire here for the javelins, and surely these Southron Warband are not long for the battlefield either. Shaken. They were wavering for a moment, and I imagine that's going to once again be the case. Though maybe not with the cavalry support. This unit is now maybe weak enough, the Beast Hunters, to the fact that if you did overwhelm them with cavalry numbers, you would be able to rout them off potentially. This is all that Hertuma High has over here that can easily move forward and continue this attack anyway, so maybe the urgency isn't necessarily needed quite so much. Still the middle, where Winged Swordsman and Tommy have got a lot of their forces marshalled, not ready to move in just yet. Or I say that, there is a unit of Muhad Berserkers that did move forwards, but one single unit is not going to be enough to really make too much of a dent. This is an interesting situation though, because the usual confines of the higher end units and lower end units aren't really the case because of the limitations placed on both sides by what part of the Harad roster they were able to pick their units from. Reigning Berserkers being finished off now. Southron Archers being in melee is not necessarily where they want to be, but they will get a few kills in there nonetheless with their short blades. Cavalry on the move forward again. Black Serpent Bodyguard hovering around, but as soon as they come forward, it's all hands on deck for the Beastmasters, and the javelins are going to be tossed their way. So again, they're not going to want to hang around for an extended period of time either. Serpent Camel Archers trying to offer a little bit of cover as they pull back. Still plenty of reserves, especially those Serpent Guards, ready to move forward should the need arise. Hashari now moving forward. Standard Hashari. Again, assassin units are pretty effective in melee in terms of their stats, but they'll be wishing they had a few of those berserkers around them, if nothing else for the numbers, but it would also be a force multiplier in terms of the damage they were capable of doing. Hashari are not going to be too thrilled about being under arrow fire either. Those robes are hardly heavy armour after all. The remaining Mumakil moving forward, and there's not a huge amount of anti-cavalry now, to be fair. Single unit of Serpent Guard. Batter them out of the way, no problem at all with those tusks. There we go, that splash damage in effect. It's difficult to deliberately use that with the Mumakil, but when they are able to use it, it is exceedingly devastating. Again, maybe it's thematic that they are difficult beasts to control. So yeah, Hotumahai still the one pressurising the defenders more than anyone else. The attack over here from Nuke has very much fallen silent as well. Again, casualties inflicted on both sides. Individual heavy cavalry losses from the defenders may be more significant, but in terms of numbers, certainly the attackers have been on the worst side of that, even given the nature of attackers needing to be able to accept a few losses. And the Serpent Camel Archers firing away over the heads of the Mumakil this time, going after instead the Hashari Stalkers, which is fair enough, they are one of the more dangerous attacking tools, as we've already seen on the other side of the battlefield today. Used to good effect over there. Try and navigate this bridge once again, potentially going to go forward with the Berserkers. Good amount of damage, and as we perhaps suspected, those Serpent Camel Archers are one of the key aspects for the attackers so far, or defenders I should say. That is a sign as well that they've been quite liberal with their ammunition, so how much are they going to have left in the tank for later, which is when their poison projectiles would also be at their potentially most potent. Can't argue with the kills they're getting though, at least. Hashari now moving forward. The gap that was given to them by the Mumakil, but another unit of Southron pikemen now plugging this very narrow gap that both sides will have to fight their way through. And again, perhaps the tribal Harad forces are not necessarily the best at doing a mass push either, which would be another way of dealing with the Southern pikemen. Mass push with their infantry anyway. Obviously the Mumakil would be good at doing it, but conversely it's not a good idea at all to try and do that with Mumakil against pikes, because they will end up melting away really very, very quickly. Already backstop units in place though, so the defenders have been spreading themselves out quite nicely thus far. Defeat seems certain for the Hashari. Again, not enough numbers here, moving them forward absent any sort of support might prove to be a little bit of a problem, but some more serious units moving forward now. Champions of Nafarat and the other Trollmen class units. Hotumahai has already expended a fair amount of his troops, however. Seven Camel Archers still firing away on the low ground. Plenty of rank and file soldiers down here. Camel Archers. One thing I like about the Camel Archers and stuff like the Nar Rim from Rune is the trails on their projectiles make it very easy to see what they're targeting, whereas that's not always the case with the regular ones, which blend in, which is more thematic, I suppose. Arrow trails in future Warhammer, I say Warhammer, Total War titles, bit of a Freudian slip there, I suppose. But even stuff like Shogun 2 has got those arrow trails in it on standard archers as well, and it's good from a gameplay perspective, I suppose, but from an atmosphere perspective, less so. I have to wonder what sort of poison these guys are using that it causes a black trail. Another attack moving forward, this time Trollmen in the vanguard, so more serious over here as well. Muhad Beast Hunters providing some support with their javelins, going after the Southron pikemen. But again, the defenders giving as good as they get, the Trollmen taking hits from arrows and also very outnumbered on this front line. So that could prove to be a problem moving forwards. Mumakil Second Camel Archers also taking some hits by the looks of things, though. From other sources across the water. Our Beast Masters, or Beast Hunters I should say, out of ammunition. I mean, the Trollmen definitely needed support a little bit more quickly than this, but this is going to be the nature of this fight, I think, just because of the odd nature of the army compositions. Both sides are going to have to make compromises in places where they would probably rather not. And as the time in the battle ticks down, as long as the attackers still have access to some of their more dangerous units late on, the defenders need to make sure they've got something left in the tank, whether it's stuff like the Serpent Camel Archers or regular archers or pikes or something, cavalry as well, that they can use to try and equalise a somewhat inevitable quality discrepancy they're going to be having to face in the late game. Again, Demons of the Desert moving forwards. Saw Tommy using his Demons of the Desert and ballooning those javelins way up into the sky, especially given the punch through that the Demons of the Desert javelins have. That's absolutely not the way you want to be using them if at all possible, but obviously that wasn't the intention. Winged Swordsman now moving forward. Haven't seen too much of his army so far. Pretty much everything's still in reserve except for that Mumakil that was wandering around the backfield. Are they going to charge in? The longer they dawdle in this street, the more likely it is they're going to get shot up by enemy projectiles. Demons of the Desert definitely the target of their ire. That was a good choice of target though. Huge blob of units. Again, that's where the follow through from those javelins is going to be very, very helpful indeed. More big damage. Gonna have to move all of these units now. Potentially going to retreat even further as a result of this, so forcing a pretty significant change in approach, although Winged Swordsman Mumakil are moving forward. I'm not sure if this is necessarily the right moment to have done that. Regular infantry, yes. Mumakil, though, if they end up dying to Haradrim Spearmen, that will not be ideal. They will definitely die to the pikemen, so they're going to need to turn around if they know what's good for them, but I don't know if full control over the unit is still possible. They are going to be able to get out of there in the end. Meanwhile, over here, the Trollmen in this narrow gap starting to put the screws to Hidden's army. Don't know if Hertumahai necessarily has too much left in reserve, mind you. Some Stalkers, another unit of Trollmen, another unit of Fishari, so everything in Hertumahai's army at this point is of pretty damn good quality, to be honest. And there's not a huge amount of it, so this is really the litmus test. Whether or not the defenders with their archers and their pikes are going to be able to hold back a force as savage as the one that is now assailing them. Also, the attack over here has now commenced once again. This is a pretty wide choke point as well. Swings and roundabouts for both sides though, really. I think considering the crossfire and the fact that the artillery is on Overwatch, it is absolutely worth the defenders' while to try and hold here, but it does give the attackers the opportunity to try and punch through weaker sections of the line with their Trollman. So far, the defensive lines are holding. What about the bridge attack? Very narrow position to try and force their way through. Hishari and Trollmen now forwards together. But more of the defenders' ranks have moved forward as well, albeit some of them are Southron archers who are not going to be up to much in melee. So again, heavily dependent on those upgraded Serpent Guard to be holding those front lines. I mean, the Champions of Nafarat, though, still such a big quality discrepancy. And now, oof, Hertumahai's general domed by a single arrow. Very King Harold, that. Still some pressure coming in, which they absolutely need. This is the sort of moment where their archers may very well be the difference between victory and defeat for the defenders. This is the sort of thing which is definitely going to add up come the late game. Southron archers getting attacked by Hashari now, so I think this is the moment really where we're going to see the outer defence start to crumble, the dominoes will start to fall, and then the defenders will have to try and bank up if they can in the interior of the settlements, although so much of their units now are actually trapped to a certain extent that that transitional phase might be too costly for them to engage in. And that might be why we're seeing more and more defensive units be committed forwards, even though you can clearly sense the momentum creeping over to the attacker's favour. They are trying to salvage the situation by being a little bit more aggressive than you would expect defenders to be, perhaps. So of course in melee it's going to be more difficult for the very deadly throwing projectiles to have their way as they would like. Oh no, there are serpent archers up on the wall. So yeah, poison projectiles, again, not the most damaging though. We have already seen Muhad berserkers. Definitely can be routed though, even in the early and mid game, and maybe throwing off some of these numbers at this point is a worthy goal. Berserkers in behind enemy lines. Still a pretty good front line has been set up over here, mind you, from White Dolphin's defending force. Another attacking general as well. That is the sort of thing which very well could add up. I don't think the Trollmen will flee too easily, nor the Hashari, but they are still going to be dependent on those Muhad units providing some numbers around those forces. It's an unfortunate loss actually for Tommy and his general, because they were very much claiming the upper hand in this fight. That's just the way it goes sometimes, I guess. Dismounted Serpent Guard, still Beast Hunters there. Demons of the Desert absolutely slicing their way down the lines that Medexa had set up as well. That's going to be devastating again. Not necessarily the most high quality of units, but I think at this point, seeing the way the battle is starting to move, just doing damage en masse might be enough to put the defenders in a position that they can't recover from. And also speed is of the essence when you've got that ballista up on the high ground taking pot shots at you. Black Serpent Bodyguard. Standard Serpent Guard as well. The charges from those lances may prove to be extremely important. Serpent Camel Archers getting in amongst the Demons of the Desert, who will do a lot of damage in melee to the Camel Riders. Dismounted Serpent Guard again. Still 77 of them. That number is dwindling ever more. Here, meanwhile, slow but sure progress by the Trollmen over here as well. Frontline was originally a little bit further back, but now trying to block as best they can. Southron Archers still firing away in behind them, so they do need to maintain their position over here just to make sure they've got this vantage point, albeit this part of the settlement not necessarily being pressured quite so much because Hertumahai was left to his own devices. The condensed form of the attackers is over here really, in this half where the other three are plying their trade. Beastmasters very close to the front line, albeit this attack seems to have been halted. Says victory still seems certain for the Trollman. That may prove to be the case as well, with the Hashari about to do some serious damage to this almost entirely Southron front line. Few Serpent Guard in there, but yeah, that's going to be big damage. Grisly indeed. Hashari cycling their way across as well. Another unit. Daggers at the ready. No longer do their swords dance around their heads when they've got their daggers drawn. Foul sorcery indeed that was. Champions of Nafarat, maybe a little bit isolated. This is where they could be picked off. But again, the aggression has paid off. Tommy's army is significantly bloodied as a result of it, but it is the sort of thing which will pay dividends later on. Another charge. The fact they're on a slight hill might make things a little bit more awkward. The ranks being a little bit spread out as well. But still a good use of the cavalry here. The more of the trollmen they can kill, the better. I look like one of the defending Harad generals, even though I said ally, but I guess they're all technically Harad. Even though one of them is marked as Numenor. I wonder what the endgame splash screen is going to let us see. I wonder if this is the pretty much unique situation where we could see all 8 players' kill counts. I kind of doubt it. I think because they're marked as Numenor, we won't be able to see that, but we'll see. Beast Hunters again, mounted units, being used in lieu of infantry in part here because both sides have kind of had to on occasion, albeit both sides have also paid the price for that. Spears routing off though as a result of the cavalry's presence. Again, more Hashari hits. Those high damage projectiles are certainly starting to leave their mark on the defending forces. Serpent archers still firing away. Again, late game, this may very well actually be the strongest melee combatant for Harad as well, or defending Harad. They are quite accomplished after all. Two-handed swords in melee. Still a few units from Y2K left in reserve over here. So too from Hertumahai though, with some Hashari skulking around. And fair play to the Southron pikemen. They have been able to stop this advance pretty much dead in its tracks. I thought the trollmen were routing for a second then. I thought that doesn't seem quite right to me. And no, they're being manually taken off the front line. Yeah, this is exactly what you want your pikes to do though, even when they're outmatched. Just hold the enemy at arm's length for as long as you can. Trying to use the archers to support for the damage, but the Hashari are going to be able to filter around the front line now with the Southrons having taken just a little bit too much damage, and the Hashari are going to go to town in melee. That's going to be pretty painful for them as well. The Southrons, that is, less so the Hashari. And the Trollmen coming back now. Bit of crossfire though. Yeah, this front line looks like it's going to rout at any moment. Punished once more. Still able to get those point blank shots though, stand and shoot. So it is still going to be painful for Hertumahai. I don't know how much he's necessarily going to be able to bring to the table. One Mumakil got an awfully long way into the settlement before ultimately being stopped. Beast Hunters, or Beast Masters I should say, overrunning the front line. What remained of this defensive position, which was doing quite well from White Dolphin, ultimately overrun. Standard Haradrim Spearmen. It's never going to end well when you're having to face down Trollmen, which was always one of the likely outcomes here. Again, it's going to be longevity here. If it was going to come down to just sheer brute force, it was always going to be the tribals that had the edge there. But when you're attacking into a well-prepared defense, endurance can be a big part of the equation. That's where one of the general's units are. Can they escape back into the settlement? They should be able to. They've got some cavalry to screen them, and actually over here they have been able to completely outlast the attacks. Those trollmen that got in behind the lines, that wide front line as well, the Overwatcher and the Ballista and the supporting units were able to stymie the attack over here. To a certain extent it seems. Still some Hashari being a bit of a menace, but yeah, I mean, victories and defeats across the field for both sides. Pretty much a dead even balance of power as well. More projectiles coming in. More Hashari falling by the wayside. Nasty, nasty stuff. This unit of Serpent Archers has been firing for quite a long time and going after more of the Hashari. Volume of kills equally important for both sides at this point, I think. Another front line being tested, a front line of Southron Archers against a very healthy unit of Hashari without those archers retargeting. This is definitely a fight which is only going to end one way. Southron Archers looping a few shots overhead. Now moving forward again, very depleted. So I mean, to be fair to these Southron Archers, they did do a pretty good job at staying alive this long and doing some pretty decent damage, but this is ultimately going to be end of the line for them. Any kills they get with their short blades against opponents like this would be a very unexpected bonus for them. Attacking Hashari Stalkers, taking a few shots as well at the retreating forces. And it's been an elongated retreat, this. Roger and Ballista firing what exactly? Nothing much. Thudding into the building there, thinking they're trying to arc their shots over to hit the Trollmen, but this is not a catapult, this is a ballista. A mostly linear line of sight is going to be needed. It's a little bit of up-down motion, but nowhere near enough to curve it over the top of a building, even if it is only one story tall. So I guess at this point, order of the day is going to be to try and secure everything outside of this inner fortress. Not really a keep because of the natural cliffs, but Hashari. Turn around again, no. Again, this is where those lancers could be a really, really big problem. You'd imagine that several of them each charge are going to fall away, but they're also one of the best choices of units for dealing with all of the trollmen that remain. Another charge coming in. Only the front ranks of the units though. Medieval 2 pathfinding, you gotta love it. This unit of dismounted Serpent Guard could not be salvaged. Broken and fighting to the death, and to the death it shall be. Beast Hunters, Trollmen now moving forward, so there is still an outer defence happening over here. Tumahai is the one who could come around and attack from the other angle to give Winged Swordsman a slightly easier pathway through. Southron Pikemen in the way for the moment, but mass is clearly the order of the day here. Going to try and just bludgeon their way through. A little further back, bit of friendly fire there, as a ballista is certainly more than capable of, and more bolts just thudding into the defensive structures. I think if you were going to park the ballista anywhere at this point, where would you put it? You would have to either put it up towards the final stand in front of the Grand Palace at the back, or on one of the outer walls to try and shoot as the attackers try and make their way forwards, but that does somewhat commit you to totally defending the outer walls, this ballista having already ballistae, having already used up all of its bolts earlier on, but seemingly to pretty good effect. Can't complain too much about the defenders there. Well, the defenders can't complain too much about that there. Southron Pikemen going to try and retreat. That's bold, considering they were the only units left. They didn't rout though, managing to hold their mentality together just for that. For now, anyway. Are the Trollmen going to be able to catch them? Yes, they are, because they stopped sprinting. Big mistake. That's going to be enough to cause them to perish en masse, unfortunately. That might be enough to rout them. No wavering just yet. They will be able to get back into defensive shape, and that's an important save. How much more of that can they do? Shari. Still a full unit of champions of Nafarats, and well, there's actually some Haradrim spearmen back here. Don't know how they quite got here. I mean, it looks like they're chasing down the champions, which doesn't quite make sense. If the champions turned around, they'd be able to rout them off extremely quickly, considering they're already wavering. Although they're actually going to courteously get out of the way by the looks of things. No, now they see. And when your attention is elsewhere, these are the things that can slip the net sometimes. This will be what we usher in the final 10,000 frames with. I thought they would instantly rout, actually, but I guess the numbers is what was holding them together. Not that that will be the case for too much longer. When I say that, usually when a unit is wavering like this, they do quit the field a little bit more swiftly than these guys have decided to stick around for, especially when they're in the face of one of the more monstrous units of infantry that the game has to offer. There they go. Fighting to the death, though. I mean, this is one of the rare cases where actually if you were a unit that was routing, you actually do have free passage off the field if you fled. Unlike normally where they have to go through the enemies they were already fighting anyway. Shari ready to go. Skiltron formation. It's a bit of a rarity. Only very select units have Skiltron formation. They tend to be the most basic of spears, like the Haradrim here. Many a unit of spearmen now do have access to the shield wall formation, and have done for a long time actually. Stalkers, again, this is the area where Hertumahai's more limited numbers might make it difficult for him to have the kind of impact that he would want. Southron Archers immediately going to open up on their quarry. Some Hashari over there actually. I think they were trying to get into a position where they could perhaps interrupt this unit of Southron Archers, but easy prey for the camels in the end. There's a unit of Serpent Archers up here as well. They have a good angle. They're going to be able to finish off those Hashari, although that is an awful lot of arrows put down range for 5 infantry units. There's even more considering they killed one of them. One of those interesting things, really, isn't it? How much resources you're putting into killing an ever-dwindling amount of units. There must be a mathematical formula for this sort of thing. But the long and the short of it is, that was an awful lot of arrows that probably could have been better used elsewhere. Looks like a bit of friendly fire was also accrued again by this ballista, which has not had the best of luck for Y2K in terms of finding a good choice of target, albeit the Hashari that are in that gap might very well be it. Says they're firing missiles, but it looks as though they're struggling to reload and aim the thing. A couple of units of Serpent Archers. In terms of numbers, Cavalry support the defenders with the defensive position still. Still looking pretty reasonable. Javelins though, again good choice of target. Catching the Serpent Archers a bit cold there. Second unit of Serpent Archers as well. Getting stuck in with the Trollmen, the only thing that the Trollmen will consider a worthy challenge among the defenders today on a one-to-one basis. Six Black Serpent Bodyguard remain. Still the Serpent Camel Archers as well. Ooh, that is grisly though. Again, the Demons of the Desert. Perhaps tactically the most versatile units for the defenders, but certainly in terms of that damaging punch, we've seen what the tribal units of Harad are capable of today, there's no doubt about that. Getting ready for another series of strikes. There they go. Scything their way through those south runs. Again, volume of kills just as important at this stage, you would suggest. A bit of a tangling between the two camel riders here. I guess again, the scare horses trait is one of those weird ones where it's very difficult to see how effective that's actually being, but it's also not really going to be too relevant when it's camel to camel anyway, although there are some black serpents in there. I always took that to mean that it's the morale of horse units, but I'm not sure if that's actually true. I don't know if the scare horses trait does much of anything. I'm sure it has an effect, but it's probably fairly marginal in the same way that the impetuous trait is. Defending archers trying to do some of the damage that the Demons of the Desert did to them, but obviously the rate at which they're able to do that damage is significantly less. Nonetheless, very important anyway. And the attackers have been doing the business at different times in this battle. I mean, here, because of the positioning of the ballista, you would be pretty concerned, I suppose. Another defending general falls. Fairly even on the old general kill counts at this stage. Trollmen rounding the corner. Are they going to begin the attack over here as well? As soon as they did that, though, the bolts started flying. Again, though, still haven't really seen an effective strike from Y2K's ballista. But the threat of it has definitely affected what the attackers have been doing. So not all value is achieved by kill counts alone. Second camel archers careening into the backs of those Hashari and Trollmen. Pikes now adding their expertise to the front line also. The Demons of the Desert are back. Even if they just get into melee with the Serpent Camel Archers, to be fair, they do have an anti-cavalry bonus up close, so that could be enough to make a pretty significant difference. Champions of Nafarat also still here. Not quite in pristine condition anymore from Winged Swordsman, but in terms of a singular unit, the most powerful melee combatant that does still remain. Charging in. Going to be able to get into the side of the pikemen as well, which surely is going to mean that they're not long for this world. Barreling through them and causing them to become shaken. Unsurprisingly as well. Balance of power hasn't been shifting too much though throughout these more key moments in proceedings. Not quite sure how this unit of Hashari managed to get through. I guess they attacked through from over there and have managed to get in and amongst things. As a result of that, Winged Swordsman is free to send the rest of his Trollmen in without fear of being assailed by the ballista. These Hashari will need some support after all, but it looks like they're going to get it, and that could be key. If they're able to collapse this part of the defence, they will be able to move on, compartmentalise what's left of the defenders' ranks, and finish them off one by one. Unit of Serpent Archers, though. Again, as we mentioned, maybe not the most damaging, but at this late stage, when the numbers are what they are, just having that volume of arrows into the backs of vulnerable units, and dangerous units as well in the Trollman, may very well prove to be the difference between victory and defeat, as of course they can get involved in melee later on as well, over 100 very competent combatants. Second unit of them as well from Hidden, so I mean Hidden did manage to get in behind enemy lines, but I think he's going to be the one to pay the price against the Haradrim over here. He's got some impressive units still remaining, but the numbers maybe are a little bit too much to overcome, we'll have to see. Serpent Archers out of ammunition now, but getting involved in melee. Those Trollmen though are healthy enough to overcome though, I think. So I think one engagement each. This one, the Hashari, may end up losing in the long run. Oh no, actually the Demons of the Desert are over here. Yeah, I think with this, they're winning over here with the strength of their demons and such. I think one by one, I think the attackers are going to take it from here. I think. It's going to be tough to turn it around at any rate. Southron Pikeman. Still alive again, and still fighting and not fleeing. Again, credit where credit's due. I mean, a lot of the time Southron units like this do buckle more quickly, but between them and the Haradrim Spearmen earlier on, the very entry-level Harad units have proven to be a little bit more mentally resilient than maybe I would have given them credit for. But yeah, securing this area over here. Another unit of Southron Pikemen on the way. Demons of the Desert being pursued. Another defending general falls. I mean, you can understand why they're going after those Demons of the Desert because of the amount of damage they just did to the units over here, but it's a bit of a moot point at this point. The damage has already been done. Anything extra, I think, is a bit of a bonus. And now, well, they're going to get out of the way of the Serpent Archers. They're going to try and get another volley. But they are going to get engaged in melee now. Pinned against the cliff wall as well, so if they do manage to slip away, it will be with fewer of their number. But yeah, they're now fully surrounded, really, as a result of this. They're being forced to consolidate in the middle of a random street within the keep. Pikes, late game pikes, but on this occasion it's definitely not going to be enough to turn things around for them, you would say. And the rebellion looks like it's going to be successful. Another general. Is that all the generals now? That might be the final general left on the field. Well, as soon as I say that, I was proven wrong, but now it certainly is the final general on the field. So all generals dead. All of the Black Serpent Lords and all of the Ar-Pharazôn clones have fallen in this civil war. Archers, one Southron Archer, and they're still hunting down those demons. I guess they just want them dead. If they're gonna cause a unit to be finished off, they want it to be that. 51 Serpent Archers, mind you, and 46, so close to 100 of them still remain. 48 Champions of Nafrat, some Hashari. Very, very close indeed, this. So I can understand as though the demons have been able to wriggle free, and even with just 7 of them, surely with some support from them, maybe the pikes will be enough. Serpent Archers still getting in the way of some of the units over there. 1% remains only for the attackers, but you would say that they've got the more impressive units still remaining, certainly singularly in the Champions of Nafrat. Getting a decent... oh, and a rout from the Haradrim Spearmen. I mean, at this point, even though they're only very basic, the numbers that you could be missing out on as a result of a rout like that. Going after the demons, but pulling off a unit of Serpent Archers as a result. And I think you would need both of the units of Serpent Archers to finish off the champions and the few Hashari that remain over here. Saffron Warband, 28 of them. If the defenders end up losing, because I think actually if they had those Haradrim Spearmen, there would be simply too many units to deal with over here, but as it stands, it's going to be right on a knife's edge. I mean, they're having to... That one Southron archer is going to get in the way of the demons by the looks of things. Or try to. The announcer still fancies the attacker's chances. Balance of forces is evenly matched. I mean, surely one more volley from the demons of the desert. Again, even though there's only 4 of them, but their projectiles are so deadly that even with 4 of them, it's enough to make a decent impact. And at that point, and at this point, that's all we really need. Good hits. Serpent archers taking some damage as a result of that as well. Very small amount of units left, so a very competitive one this. I can see why Tommy was eager for this one to be shown. And again, it would have slipped through the cracks if he hadn't reminded me of it, so... One of those moments of good fortune. Two of them remain now. 2 of the demons. Champions Napper at 26 of them are left. But yeah, the Serpent Archer's just running out of steam now. Pikes were an interesting thing as well. Just goes to show that strength in melee. And that was really the main thing that the tribal forces would have over the civilized forces of Harad, shall we say. That sheer heft up close. Like we said, the more tactical flexibility for the defenders. Archers, cavalry certainly was in their favour with the lancers. The Mumakil was a bit more specialty after all. Yeah, this was always a little bit more of a organisational advantages versus sheer damage dealing capabilities, I suppose, and the latter of those two things is going to be enough in spite of their weaknesses in this sort of situation, considering their lack of armour and defensive sensibilities all around. But then again, this was split rosters, and that is going to be that. 99 to 100. So 21 champions of Nafrat. There is some Hashari in there as well. 5 Hashari. So 26 of the attackers still remain. The demons might be roaming around somewhere as well. There were 2 of them, weren't there? But there we have it. An attacker victory. A very, very good battle as well. So there we have it. And yeah, it's kind of a difficult one to judge this because both sides had to deal with only being able to use a portion of the roster, which is obviously not how factions are designed in the first place. So serious shortcomings for both sides here. But interestingly enough, I think both sides' shortcomings kind of cancelled each other out in a way. Again, we already mentioned the light armour and low defensive ability of the tribal units, but also the defenders didn't really have the damage dealing capabilities to fully take advantage of that. And also, again, they lacked that high-end power, but then they had all of the mid-range stuff. We saw, after all, that the standard MUHADS didn't really do a whole lot against stuff like the Serpent Guard and the Serpent Archers. But then, likewise, that quality in the end was just a little bit too much to deal with. So let's see what did the damage, and we shall see everything from... Yeah, so we'll only see the attackers here, so the ones under the banner of Numenor. So Champions of Nafra, unsurprisingly, late on, very, very powerful. Hashari, Trollmen, Demons of the Desert with 127, which is not bad, but you could do better. And the regular units struggling significantly more. Again, Hashari Stalkers, Mumakil with 267 is not bad. Demons of the Desert, 491, big performance from them. Champions of Nafrat, Trollman. It's going to be a similar story, albeit the Beast Hunters did a little bit better in this army as well, so Winged Swordsman able to get some clearer shots with his regular javelins. As for Tommy's army, yeah, again, Demons, Champions, the Trollmen doing very well, 324. Slightly better performance as well from the Muhad Berserkers this time around. Yeah, and then finally we have Nuke, who probably struggled the most. I think that wider position, I think that Ballista did quite a lot of damage to him from the high ground, and also some pretty nasty crossfire, which is where, again, that more lightweight nature of some of those tribal units would have been more of a problem. But even then, Demons of the Desert still getting one shy of 200 kills and then 277 kills respectively. Big numbers, and the bodyguard units doing well also. So yeah, big thank you for Tommy for sending this one in, albeit a long time ago. I'm glad that you reminded me of it, because again, it's one of those things that kind of, I guess you must have given it to me originally, about when my schedule was just falling apart, when the job change and house change and a few other things were starting to crush me underfoot. But yeah, we got there in the end, is the important thing. And it's a good thing too, because it's one of the more unique and one of the more interesting battles we've seen in a while. And, well, I say interesting battle. We have plenty of interesting battles lately, but an interesting concept, shall we say. Something a bit different. And you have to ask, what would other factions be like? Albeit only a few have really got the distinct split down the middle that Harad have, and only a few have got rosters big enough to support this kind of thing anyway. You could say that maybe the Rovanian could do it. You could say that possibly Dorwinian, but Dorwinian's roster is so small that the armies would end up being very, very simplistic. Yeah, it's a sort of an interesting think piece, I suppose, to see what possibly could be done regarding this sort of battle. But anyway, even if this ends up just being a one-off, very, very good indeed. And yeah, as we move forward, there are a couple more scenarios that I've got to do. This is the earliest replay that it was in the backlog, and we will be starting from there. So quite a few actually were sent to me by White Dolphin and Hidden, who are both on the opposing side today. So we'll be making our way through them piece by piece alongside the scenarios that I've already got. And yeah, we'll take it from there. So big thank you to Tommy, big thanks to all the players once again. I hope you enjoyed this, and hope you'll join me for whatever is next.